Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Greg Tseng with us. Greg, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, in case people don't know a whole lot about you, they should. You're the co-founder of Tagged and Hi5, companies that have acquired over 300 million users combined. Is that right? Is that stat correct?
That is true. That's true.
Awesome. Well,
300 million between the two properties.
Yeah, well then you're the right person to have on the show. And Tag actually acquired Hi5, and so we'll focus on Tag for this interview because that'll be kind of where a lot of the insights will come from. So tell us, Greg, what year did Tag launch?
So Tag launched in October of 2004 as a social network for U.S. teens. So targeting the U.S. high school market and people aged 13 to 19.
Okay. So in that original mission, when you were targeting 13 and 19-year-olds back then, how big did Tag grow to before you guys kind of pivoted? And we'll get to that in a second.
Right. So Tagged, when we were just a teen site, grew to, I want to say, a few million registered users. So let's see. We launched in '04. By the end of '05, we were at 1 million registered users, and at the end of '06, we were at 12 million registered users. But in October of '06, we opened up to all countries and all ages 13 plus.
Gotcha.
And so I'd say up to then, when we were all teens, it was somewhere in the single-digit millions.
Yeah. Now, give us some kind of context, because it's hard to know where social networks were at back then. It's hard to remember. How big were other social networks growing around that same time? Were you all comparable? Were they outpacing you? How was that going?
We were all, really competing to be the king of social networking. So Friendster was really the one that really kicked things off. And, I first heard about and really paid attention to Friendster in January of 2003. Then MySpace launched in September of '03. Hi5 we helped launch in December of '03.
Okay.
Then 2 months later, in February of '04 is when Facebook launched, just at Harvard.
Yeah.
And given that I went to Harvard, I was one of the first few thousand people on Facebook. And back then, Facebook was actually known as Friendster for college students.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Sort of like within the valley, because Friendster was actually what everyone based social networking on. And then Tag launched in October of 2004, so later that year.
Yeah.
And during that time, there were probably about 10 or so social networks. They were all vying to be the king. So in addition to these ones that I mentioned, there was also Bebo, there was Orchid, the one launched by Google, and some others. And so, depending on which metric you looked at, we were in different orders. There were some times when Tagged was the number one if you looked at just new registered users per day. But then typically by usage, it quickly became either Facebook or MySpace was number one for a while.
Yeah. And so you said you kind of changed mission. At first it was high school students, 13 to 19, and then you kind of opened it up to all ages across the world. What happened at that point when you guys opened it up? Was that a win? Did it just not really change anything for you? What happened there?
So it changed things a bit because it really expanded our potential user base from only 25 million U.S. teenagers to 1 billion people online at the time. And so we were able to, massively grow our user base through our viral marketing techniques. In the year 2007, we grew from 12 million registered users to about 60 million by the end of 2007. And so that was a big change for us.
Yeah, and then you actually went through another kind of big change, though, because you actually pivoted again in terms of how you positioned the company and what the company was really on mission to do. So what was the next kind of big change for Tagged?
Yeah, so the next big change was actually spurred from our experience with Newsfeed. So in that same month, October '06, when we and Facebook and other social networks opened up to all countries and ages, 13 plus, Facebook also launched Newsfeed. And you remember back then, there's actually a lot of hubbub about, oh my gosh, is Facebook exposing too much information, so on and so forth. But for most of us social networking founders and CEOs, we just thought of that as what a great idea. Wish I had thought of that. Mm-hmm. And every social network begun launching their own newsfeed. So later that year, Bebo and Hi5 launched theirs, and we launched ours in April of '07. But whereas Facebook and all the others saw lots of engagement increases from newsfeed, we didn't see anything. It was as though we didn't do anything, even though we worked really hard on this new feature. And so that really got us thinking about, why is that? Why is everyone, seeing this great growth while we are being flat? And by the way, we are actually no longer even in the top 5 anymore. We're now the number 7 social network. So we took a good hard look at our stats, did a lot of user surveys and such, and found out that people on Tagged were quote unquote misusing Tagged already to meet new people on the site. And no wonder newsfeed didn't work, because the feed of your friends from the past 10 years, that's a lot more interesting than people that you just met in the past 10 days.
Yeah.
Right. And so given that people were already using our site to meet meet new people, plus we were starting to lag behind in social networking, that got us to what was a logical but also like an emotionally hard decision to accept, which is that we weren't going to win social networking, i.e. we were going to lose social networking. The right move to make is actually now pivot to a space that we call social discovery, which is our way of saying meeting new people and discovering new social relationships.
Yeah.
And so we made that pivot at the end of 2007.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in just a second, but you mentioned something really interesting, that they were already misusing Tagged. Is that one of the lessons you kind of walk away with, is look at a product and see how people are misusing it, and maybe it's not they're misusing it, it's that you gave them the wrong product?
Yeah. So, I mean, I sort of, put misuse in quotes, because really entrepreneurs should be, quote unquote, heat-seeking missiles, and be constantly, whether it's big course corrections or small minor corrections, going to where the so-called heat and the opportunity and the action really is.
Yeah.
So really, it's a lesson in just constantly being, understanding your users, taking a pulse of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and so on, and then making adjustments as necessary.
Yeah. And so you guys grew to about 60 million, you said, before this kind of change. What kind of growth have you seen? So you went from the single-digit millions when you were focused on a high school to 60 million or so when you're kind of global, worldwide, all ages. And now, where are you guys at?
Well, so now with both Tagged and Hi5, we are over 300 million registered users. But more importantly, it's registered users is only part of the game. It's very easy to get a lot of growth, or I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier to just get a lot of registered users than it is to also make them really active and actually build a product that they get lots of sustainable value out of.
Yeah.
So a lot of our work since the start of 2008 was actually on once we pivoted to social discovery, then building a great social discovery product that was very engaging, that provided a lot of value, so that people want to use the site repeatedly. Yeah. And any consumer product really needs to be used repeatedly in order to have sustainable value. Yeah. And so that was our big challenge starting in 2008.
Yeah, and you guys have an interesting story because you had so much growth before you really found product market fit. I mean, people wish they could have millions of users when they still don't have the right product in the market. What do you advise other companies to do? Do you say they should grow first, or do you say they should try to find product market fit earlier than you guys, and it just worked out for you all?
Yeah, so I would say that a consumer startup, like I said, only has value if you really if users are finding value and thus use the site repeatedly and there's sustainable engagement. Mm-hmm. Okay, and thus a startup's primary goal before they have product market fit is product market fit. Okay?
Okay.
That really should be the only goal. And so anything that you do should be in service to that goal. Okay, so rather than just growing for growth's sake, you want to grow in service of product market fit. So you probably want enough growth, enough users, so that you can do rapid A/B testing. So you can do a lot of optimization, and you're not. And in order to iterate towards product market fit, where you are not slowed down due to too few users.
Yeah.
So that's one reason you want growth. Another reason you might want growth is if the people and the users are part of the product. So in our case with social networking and now social discovery, because the whole site is about either connecting with people you know or meeting new people, the people are part of the product. And thus it is true that the more people you have, the more likely you'll have a better user experience and then get closer to product market fit.
Yeah.
And so it really depends on the type of business that you're trying to launch. But the sort of key takeaway is that anything you do, growth, engagement, or otherwise, should be in service to finding product market fit.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for clarifying that, because I was wondering, given your unique story, how you would feel about that. Now, you mentioned earlier that with Tagged, virality was a part of it, and you actually gave a class online called Virality 101, and I want to have you walk us through some of the pieces of that class. I know you don't have your slides in front of you, so
Sure.
I'll be your slides for you. I'll remind you of the things that you have during the class. You teach that the virality is an equation V of t equals X of t by Y of t. Walk us through those three variables. What is V?
Okay, so V is virality, and so that really is the replication rate of every generation of users. So it's how many users does the average user generate?
Okay.
That's what V represents. And we break that down into two components, X and Y. So Y is the amount of spread that an average user causes. So that could be let's just leave it at that for now, and then we'll go into specific examples.
Okay.
And then X is the conversion from being pinged by part of the spread and then converting to a user yourself.
Okay.
And so we kind of just split the virality into those two components.
Yeah.
And then we also have a time constant, because, for example, say we take the example of email. Okay, Y would be the number of invites that the average user sends out, and then X would be the conversion from receiving an email to then signing up on the service yourself. So it's possible that you'll be sending out invites over time. That you send out some on sign up, and then you send some a few days later, and you have to track this over time. X can also depend over time also, because people don't check their email instantly. So X is when the email gets sent, but maybe you don't see the email until 12 hours later, and then you open it, but then you don't click on it until 24 hours later, and then it takes 24 hours before you actually sign up.
Gotcha.
And so all these need to have a time constant on them. And you can do pretty sophisticated modeling to figure out exactly where you need to be viral. But I found that a good rule of thumb is just if you can get V to be over 1.0 in 7 days, then you'll be nicely viral.
All right. Now let me ask you this. You say you want to get V over 1.0. Why is that the magic number? I know, but for our audience, why is 1 the magic number you want to be above?
Right, because if one user, say, creates one more user, then it just keeps going. Like one causes another, creates another, and it just kind of goes ad infinitum. If you go more than one, then one user creates more than one user, which creates even more than one user, and it just kind of compounds exponentially like interest in your bank account. If V is less than 1, you still get some more users, but then you get exponential decay.
Yeah.
So say like a user creates half a user, then in the next generation you only create a quarter user, and then an eighth of a user, and so on. And it kind of you still get more, but it decreases exponentially. You don't get this sort of explosive hockey stick viral growth.
Yeah, and in this class you also taught that you need to do two things. First, you need to define your viral loop, and then the second thing is you need to optimize your viral loop. At a high level, what do you mean define and optimize?
Yeah. So by define, I mean really map out every step in this one loop where one user can create one more user. Okay, so in the case of email, a user will sign up and check their email address book and decide to invite some of their contacts via email. So now you send out the emails. The emails get delivered, and then they get opened, they get clicked on to the registration page, which then the user can then sign up. Okay. And so that's the closed viral loop for the email viral loop.
And why is it important to define it? Why can't we just go out and just start doing stuff?
Because then I mean, at least for one, you don't really know what you are optimizing.
There you go.
Really, you need to define it so then you can optimize.
All right. So then, what do you mean by optimize it?
Is after you've mapped it out and sort of launch an initial version of it, you can then get stats on what are all the conversion rates on all these different steps, and then start optimizing.
Yeah.
So say that you think your registration rate is actually a little bit too low. Then start trying with removing some form fields, or maybe putting some tool tips next to form fields, or changing just layout and buttons and colors and stuff. We found, for example, that a lot of registration pages, the button will say register or sign up, but we've actually found that if you change the text of the button to next or continue, that there's actually a higher conversion there.
Really?
Yeah. And then if you also put like a little greater than sign at the end of the next so that you're moving forward, that further increases a little bit.
That's funny. You would think they would click on the one that's the final one, like you're done now, register, when really, when they're in the middle of the process, they have a greater click-through rate. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think also that it's just easier to understand. Like I think more people understand the word next than understand the word register.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Am I registering to vote? Or you got to think that this is a very mass market audience. You really want things just as simple and as clear and as usable as possible.
Yeah, and you talk about some of the ways to optimize a viral loop, and one of the things you say you could do is provide value. What do you mean when you say you need to provide value to optimize a defined viral loop?
Yeah. So what I mean by that is give people an actual valuable reason that they would want to sign up, invite their friends, open the email, and so on. Mm-hmm. And so in the case of social networking, the reason is that you want to connect with your friends. Mm-hmm. And so, like the whole service is about connecting with your friends. So the more people that you're connected with, the more valuable the service is, and thus you want to invite them.
Yeah. What are some other examples of providing value? Because not everyone's in a social network watching this, so it's just not, hey, connect with your friends. What are some other examples that you know of value you can provide in this viral loop to give people ideas?
Yeah. Well, so this might be a little too similar, but with all the new messaging apps, it's also the case where a lot of those, and they grow really virally because the whole point is to be messaging with people, right. And so there again is where the people is part of the product. Mm-hmm. If it's a case where the people aren't part of the product, you can also do it. You can sort of tack it on. So tack on the value. So I've seen on, say, Postmates, for example, after I make an order, they'll give me $1 off my next order if I tweet out the fact that I just made an order.
Okay.
Or any sort of refer a friend program. When say I go buy a pair of pants at Bonobos, and if I then refer a new customer to them, they'll give me like $25 or $50 credit.
Yeah.
Things like that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you also say that it's good to provide, make every step universally usable. Now, this might be really germane to kind of your email viral loop, but explain to us what you mean by that, make every step universally usable.
Yeah, so it's kind of touches on what I said before, which is you really want to think about this as a mass market audience. Okay, so we've now registered over 300 million people. Facebook's registered billions of people, and so if they're all so I guess you want it to be just as simple and as clear as usable, so that anybody whether they are 13 years old or 50 years old, whether they have a college degree or not, whether they live in a city or a rural area, whether they live in the U.S. or outside, are able to understand and go through your loop as easily as possible.
Yeah.
And so it's really just a comment on usability.
Yeah.
And I've just found that you can always iterate and always make things simpler, easier, more understandable, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and you just mentioned the word simpler, and the last thing you say is that less is more. Have you found in your viral loops that removing usually works better than adding? I mean, I know there's a place where you can remove too much, but...
Yeah. So generally speaking, fewer steps, fewer clicks, fewer taps, the better, just because there are fewer things to do. And so that's a general rule of thumb. But I have also seen cases where you can do too much, where you do so much that people don't even know what they're signing up for, and thus they're then less likely to sign up.
Yeah.
So I've actually seen cases where even putting, say, like a splash screen that like explains what the service is, that's just then one click or tap before you get the sign up flow, that actually could increase your overall sign up rate, even though you now have 2 pages instead of 1.
Gotcha, because you're giving them more information. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is just enough that they need it. Now you give some examples in your class of different viral loops. And some of these people will be really familiar with, maybe some they won't be. But walk us through some of these. One of the first ones you mentioned is IM, and you mentioned Facebook in that one. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yes, so a decent amount of Facebook's early growth actually came from a deal that they struck with AOL on AIM, where they had a super user account named Facebook, and any user could sign up on Facebook, import their IM buddies, and then send invites via IM from this master Facebook account to their AIM buddies.
Yeah.
And because so they're one of the few companies that had such a deal, and IM is a lot more instant, hence IM, than email, and thus they were able to get a lot of growth that way.
Yeah, and we mentioned earlier all the new messaging apps coming out. Maybe this might come full circle. There might be another way to use these messaging apps as a platform to go viral again if the APIs work the right way. Who knows? It's
possible. It's possible, and I mean, and right now, a lot of the messaging apps are growing from the user's phone contacts instead of their email address book. It's from their phone contacts, and then through SMS.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like every generation there are like new platforms, like spawn new platforms.
Yeah.
And such.
No, exactly. Do you think anybody's really figured out that mobile platform yet? It seems like it's wide open. I mean, you see Path trying to struggle and figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
Has anybody really nailed it yet, or is it just still trial and error?
Yeah, I think at this point nobody has nailed it yet, and it's probably one of the most exciting opportunities in a virality today.
Yeah, is that something that Tagged and we focused a lot on in 2013? You think?
Yes, we definitely are focusing on it this year.
Yeah. It seems like a huge potential there. You also mentioned widgets. People are familiar with some of these like RockU, but you also mentioned Slide, YouTube, MySpace. Tell us about how widgets have been used to kind of go viral.
Yeah, so widgets is a little bit in the past these days. But if you recall back in say 05 to 07, those days, widgets were just these the little elements. They could some were Flash elements and Flash embeds and such, where it can embed into other sites, including MySpace and blogs and so on. So probably the prototypical example is that at least MySpace claims that a lot of YouTube's growth was on the back of MySpace. YouTube made it so that you could easily embed a YouTube video into your MySpace page, into your blog, into any sort of website, and that would cause there to be a lot more, lots of views out there. And then clicking on the YouTube video itself would then take you to YouTube. And cause you to become a YouTube user, and maybe eventually embed a YouTube video into something that you own.
Yeah.
And so Slide is probably the one that really mostly optimize this, where they make it really easy to create a slideshow, and then once you are done creating a slideshow, you can very easily use these auto posters, which would just say like, just put in your MySpace email and password, and it will just auto post to MySpace.
Yeah.
And then the spread for a widget is actually how many views there is. And then the conversion is clicking on a button that says "Get your own," and then you can go to then the slide create page, and then create a slideshow, and then embed it into your MySpace page, and then the cycle continues from there.
So it's just like the email example you gave, just different things being plugged in for the variables, but it all still works the same.
It all still works the same. It's there's some way of spreading the word, some conversion from being hit by the spread to becoming a user yourself. Then continue to spread the word yourself.
Yeah, there you go. Facebook did something interesting where they used IM, but then eventually they became the IM that people are using. Essentially, they became a platform for viral growth. So I think we've all heard about Zynga, and that's one of the examples you use is how Zynga really popped on the platform and spread using it, right?
Yeah, so I think Facebook was really the first company that actually built a platform to enable viral marketing. So the email services never designed their email address books specifically for this. Embedding widgets into MySpace was initially just like it was actually a security hole, and that made it even possible, but spawned this whole ecosystem of widgets. Yeah. But then Facebook really decided to productize this with their platform, saying, we are this massive social platform, and now let's actually find ways where developers can actually build applications on top of Facebook, and we'll actually specifically give them viral marketing tools.
Yeah.
So Zynga was one of the biggest to do this. Where when you install their games, you can say get extra coins or benefits if you add neighbors to your farm, say, and then that would cause you to invite your friends and so on and so forth. Yeah. Zynga, I also think, is one of the best examples of a company that combined both viral marketing and paid marketing, because often companies only do one or the other because you only have competency in one or the other, or because there are people in viral marketing that see it almost as a religion and really have this religion about, we spend $0 in marketing and have a lot of pride in that and so on and so forth, and don't want to ever spend more than zero. But if you're able to have competency, and I really want to emphasize that viral marketing is a tactic, not a religion, and it's one of several different marketing tactics. And if you are able to combine and be competent at both viral and paid marketing, then the combination is even more powerful than just one or the other.
Yeah, well, because you're paying to bring people in to your viral loop so then they can go and be a part of it.
Exactly. Think about it as paid marketing just provide all the seeds that can then grow exponentially with your viral loop.
Yeah.
So if you can do both, then that is definitely better than doing one or the other.
Yeah, and we've had people on the show before that worked at Zynga as product managers, and that's exactly what they said. They said inside of Zynga, they have the ability to grow in a lot of different ways, and it's extremely powerful. So you're echoing exactly what they said. One of the final examples you give is people using Twitter to actually go viral, and you've said that people don't use Twitter as much, and you're surprised there's not more examples, but there is a few. FormSpring being one of them.
Yes. So I'm generally surprised if you say compare the amount of effort that has gone to go viral on Facebook versus on Twitter, because Twitter is also a great kind of mass market broadcast platform, and it's different in that it's more public, it's more unidirectional, and they don't have quite as many tools and such as Facebook, but it just seems like a fertile ground to go viral. And I would have just expected by now that more people would have tried and more people would have succeeded. Yeah. That said, FormSpring is a great example where it was this Q&A site where you can say, ask me anything, and I'll answer it on FormSpring. And they made it so that you could basically just tweet out Ask Me Anything,
Mm-hmm.
which would direct you to FormSpring, and also anytime you answer something, you could post that to Forms. You could post that to Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're able to grow to I think 30 million or so plus registered users on FormSpring, and also double-digit millions in monthly uniques by primarily leveraging Twitter.
Yeah, do you think their secret maybe is just that they were a little more aggressive than other people? Because it seems like other people like, hey, tweet this thing, but not really deeply integrated that so many interactions end up on Twitter. Is that part of what you
Yeah,
think they did well?
I think it's part of it. And there's also always this danger of being too aggressive, and you don't want to be too spammy, too annoying, and that gets you flack from your users. That could potentially get you trouble legally and press wise and such. So you definitely want to draw a line and not cross it.
Yeah.
That said, yeah, there's viral marketing and virality is such a overused and misused term these days that people think that, oh, just adding a tweet button means you're viral. But really, no, you really need to define this like tight viral loop that is a full closed circle loop where one user can just generate more than one user and the cycle continues. And so I think FormSpring had much more of a loop than just someone putting a tweet this button out there.
Yeah, that's a great point. What kinds of companies do you think should really lean toward viral? Because it seems like certain companies, it makes more sense. There's more of an obvious integration there. What kinds of companies should really look at viral as a huge channel?
Yeah, so I think the more that your company depends on it, the more that your product is about people, and especially about people connecting with other people, the more it makes sense. Because then sort of the people become part of the product, and you can become much more naturally viral, and all the things that you optimize are optimizing something that is really occurring very naturally already.
Yeah.
That said, there have been a lot of successful companies who, where that wasn't the case. For example, a lot of Zynga games really aren't that social, and they're really kind of single-player games with like light touch social elements, but they're still able to leverage viral marketing very well. And so I'd say it's definitely better if the viral marketing is a lot more natural. But there are ways of still providing value and in the end making it a sustainable marketing channel for you.
Yeah. Now, beyond virality, I've heard you say recently that PR has become really important for you guys, and you say that PR is just something that startups should really think about and look into. What have you kind of discovered about PR? What's been your journey there?
Yeah, so I'd say that being a very kind of product focused and numbers driven guy, starting out, I sort of didn't really see the value in PR. Thought like if we just focus on building a great product that reaches a lot of users, then the story will just tell itself. And that was an incorrect assumption. Where I guess no matter how great you are, you still need to be out there telling your story. Otherwise, either there will be a vacuum, so that there will be no story, or others will fill that vacuum for you, and
Okay.
others will be telling that story for you.
Yeah.
And there's generally speaking, if it's coming from the outside, there's a small chance that it's going to be very accurate. So that you really want your external perception to be consistent with your internal reality.
Yeah.
And to do that, you must really be out there telling your story yourself.
Yeah, and you went on TechCrunch and did a video interview. I think it was a year or two ago, something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
And it had a really great experience, wasn't it? I mean, people really were like, "Wow, Tagged, they
Yeah.
still exist and they're doing really well." And you'd been doing great, but just nobody knew about it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, did this a video interview with Michael Arrington, and then followed up with a guest post that I wrote myself. But yeah, I mean, it helps for all types of things. I mean, it helps for internal morale. It helps for recruiting, so that people within the industry knows you. It helps just generally with consumers as well. When they get to your registration page, if they've heard about you before, they're probably a lot more likely to sign up than if they haven't.
Yeah.
And so for me, it is this thing. PR is this thing that is much harder to measure and quantify, and thus it's harder for me to just believe. But sort of having gone through it, I've sort of seen the difference, and I can tell you it's real. And so every company should have their own PR strategy.
Yeah, that's great. Now you've mentioned PR, you've mentioned virality, obviously. You mentioned pay-per-click, how you see how Zynga's doing that well, and a lot of other people. Are there any other marketing channels that you hold in high regard? Maybe you use them a little bit, maybe you don't use them as much as these other ones. But what else can you list off of look, think about these a little bit at least?
Right. Well, so I mean, paid advertising comes in so many different flavors. So there is display advertising, there is search advertising, there is a mobile now. There's like the mobile version of all of these. There's also incentivized advertising where get coins for downloading this app, get coins for filling out this form. So there's just all different ways of paying for user acquisition, and really it's pretty rare that all of them work for a given product. But you really want to experiment with most of them to see if one or a few of them work for the product or service that you're trying to grow. Another one that I do hold in high regard for the people that do it well is SEO. So search engine optimization, where really you are creating pages and optimizing them so they do provide value, and thus should rise up high in search engines, and thus you get a lot of quote unquote free organic traffic from search engines. Yeah. People are trying to employ this now in app stores, and doing sort of app store optimization to when people either look on leaderboards or they search in an app store that your app comes up, and you get a lot of organic traffic that way. One of my favorite examples actually is OkCupid, which does something that I guess now is known as quote unquote content marketing, where they just write these really interesting, funny blog posts that are full of data, and they just get so many views, and it does spread, quote unquote, virally, just because it's so interesting. I mean, they don't actually optimize anything, but it spreads, and supposedly most of their new registered users comes from people that were exposed to their blog.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
that's great.
So I just find that really interesting.
No, and absolutely.
Interesting.
And I've been sucked into those blog posts. I've been browsing the web, and one pops up on Twitter, and all of a sudden it's showing you some breakdown of male versus female with some other subcategory, and you're sucked in. You're reading it, They are interesting. Well, Greg, this has been an awesome interview. I have two final questions for you here, kind of high-level questions to give back to the community a little bit. First, you're an advisor to a lot of startups. You give advice. You help a lot of them. What do you want startups to know about growth that they usually get wrong? You're speaking to a lot of startups right now that are watching this.
What do I want them to know about growth that they usually get wrong? Okay, so I would say probably a very common piece of advice is that it's something that you really need to institutionalize in your company. Okay, it's really not something that where you can just kind of set it and forget it and sort of check the box and it's done. It's something that we have talked a lot about concepts in this interview, but it's something that you just got to work on every single day. Yeah. In the viral marketing example, for example, even after you achieve virality, it's even harder to stay viral. because there are various effects which we could go to another time that will actually start to cause your virality to decrease. So even after you've crossed 1.0 to the land of virality, you want to keep on optimizing, grinding it out day after day in order to stay viral.
Yeah.
And so this applies to paid marketing as well, where the paid advertising marketplace is changing all the time. You just got to be on it. And so it's a lot of hard work, but the benefits are worth it. And so it's something that you really need to embrace, and you really need to institutionalize in your company from the top down. The CEO needs to say, this is this important that we're going to make this a core competency within the company, and then find the right team, and then that's the only way that's going to be sustainable.
Yeah, well, I think that's perfect advice to end on right there. Greg, again, thank you so much for coming on Growth Hacker TV.
Okay, thanks for having me.